Drácula, de Bram Stoker. Versión abreviada y simplificada. Edición y traducción, Multiactiva Creación y Servicios Editoriales Sociedad Limitada y Rosario Outes. Jonathan Harker's Journal. May 3rd, Bistritz. I am on my way to Transylvania, for I have to deal with a nobleman from that country. I read that the district he named is in the extreme east of the country, just on the borders of 3 states, Transylvania, Moldavia, and Bukovina, in the midst of the Carpathian Mountains, one of the wildest and least known portions of Europe. But I found that Bistritz, the post town named by Count Dracula, is a well-known place. I read that every known superstition in the world is gathered in this area. The country is full of beauty of every kind. I saw so during my trip. Count Dracula had directed me to go to the Golden Crown Hotel. I was evidently expected, for the old couple at the reception gave me a letter. My friend, welcome to the Carpathians. I am anxiously expecting you. At 3 tomorrow, my carriage will await you on the Borg Pass. I trust that your journey from London has been a happy one, and that you will enjoy your stay in my beautiful land. Your dear friend Dracula. The old couple looked at each other as if they were frightened. When I asked them if they knew Count Dracula and if they could tell me anything of his castle, both crossed themselves and simply refused to speak further. May 4th. Just before I was leaving, the old lady came up to my room and said in an hysterical way, "Must you go? It is the eve of St. George's Day. When the clock strikes midnight, all the evil things in the world will have full sway. Do you know where you are going and what you are going to?" She was in such distress that I tried to comfort her, but without effect. It was all very ridiculous, but I did not feel uncomfortable. Then she rose, and taking a crucifix from her neck and putting it round mine, went out of the room. When I got on the coach, I saw the driver talking to the landlady. They were evidently talking of me, for every now and then they looked at me. I could hear a lot of words often repeated, so I looked them up in my polyglot dictionary. I must say they did not cheer me, for amongst them were Satan, hell, witch, werewolf, or vampire. I must ask the Count about these superstitions. The last glimpse which I had of the inn yard and its crowd was they all crossing themselves. We had a fine trip during the day. When it grew dark, there seemed to be some excitement amongst the passengers, and they kept urging the driver to further speed. He lashed the horses unmercifully with his long whip. We were entering on the Borg Pass. We were already in my post. A calèche with 4 black horses drew up beside the coach. It was driven by a tall man, all in black, which seemed to hide his face from us. He took my luggage and we left. I turned my head and could see the figures of my late companions crossing themselves. I felt a little strangely. I was within a few minutes of midnight when far off in the distance began a louder and sharper howling of wolves. I felt a sort of paralysis of fear. I was afraid to speak or move. We were in complete darkness, for the clouds obscured the moon. When we stopped, the driver jumped down and held out his hand to assist me. It was pale and cold. I stood close to a great old door. The driver jumped again into his seat, shook the reins, and disappeared. I stood in silence, for I did not know what to do. There was no sign of bell or knocker. The time I waited seemed endless, and I felt doubts and fears crowding upon me. What sort of place had I come to, and among what kind of people I was? I began to rub my eyes and pinch myself to see if I was awake. It all seemed like a horrible nightmare to me. Then I heard the sound of chains. A key was turned with the noise of long disuse, and the great door swung back. Within stood a tall old man, clad in black from head to foot. He said in excellent English, "Welcome to my house." He moved impulsively forward. His hand seemed cold as ice, like the hand of that dead man. "I am Dracula, Mr. Harker. Come in. The night air is chill, and you must need to eat and rest." He led me up a great winding stair to a well-lit room in which a table was spread for supper. The Count's courteous welcome seemed to have dissipated all my doubts and fears. "Be seated and eat when you please. You will excuse me that I do not join you, but I have dined already, and I do not usually sup," he said. I had now an opportunity of observing him. His face was strong, aquiline, with a thin nose. The mouth was fixed and rather cruel, with peculiarly sharp white teeth and very red lips. He was of an extraordinary pallor. His hands were coarse. The nails were long and cut to a sharp point. We were both silent for a while. Dawn was coming. I heard the howling of many wolves. The Count said, "Listen to them, the children of the night. What music they make! But you must be tired. Your bedroom is ready. I have to be away tomorrow till the afternoon. I am all in a sea of wonders. I fear. I think strange things. God keep me." May 7th. There are odd deficiencies in the house, considering the extraordinary evidences of wealth. For instance, in none of the rooms is there a mirror. I have not seen a servant anywhere, or heard a sound near the castle except the howling of wolves. You may go anywhere you wish in the castle, except where the doors are locked, where of course you will not wish to go. There is a reason for all things to be as they are. We are in Transylvania, and this is not England. Our ways are not your ways, and there shall be to you many strange things. We had been talking about his new property in England for hours, when all at once we heard the crow of the cock. The Count, jumping to his feet, said, "There is the morning again," and quickly left me. There is something so strange about this place that I cannot but feel uneasy. I wish that I had never come. I only slept a few hours. I had hung my shaving glass by the window and was just beginning to shave. Suddenly I felt a hand on my shoulder and heard the Count's voice saying to me, "Good morning." I could see him over my shoulder, but there was no reflection of him in the mirror. At the instant I cut myself slightly, and blood was trickling over my chin. His eyes blazed with a demoniac fury. I drew away, and his hand touched the crucifix. The fury passed quickly. Then he seized the shaving glass, opened the window, and he flung it out. I went on a little exploration of the castle. I found that the castle is on the edge of a terrific cliff. I explored further. Doors everywhere, and all locked. In no place is there an exit. The castle is a true prison, and I am the prisoner. May 12th. The Count said last night, "Write now, my young friend, and say that you should stay with me until a month from now." "Do you wish me to stay so long?" I asked, for my heart grew cold at this thought. "I desire it much, nay, I will take no refusal. I pray you, my friend, that you will not discourse of things other than business in your letters." I understood that I should be careful with what I wrote, for he would be able to read it. The Count wrote also several notes. When done, he said, "You will forgive me, but I have much work to do in private this evening. Let me warn you that you should not go to sleep in any other part of the castle but your room. It is old, and it has many memories." When he left, I went up to a room where I could look out towards the south. The mere beauty seemed to cheer me. From the window I saw the Count emerge from the window, face down, with his cloak spreading out like great wings. I could not believe my eyes. I am in an awful fear, and there is no escape for me. He vanished into some hole or window. I could not see more. I must escape. I tried again all the doors. The main door was also locked. The key must be in the Count's room. At least I fell asleep, but I was not alone. There were 3 young ladies. They threw no shadow on the floor. All 3 had brilliant white sharp teeth and ruby lips. I felt a weak desire that they would kiss me. One said, "He is young and strong. There are kisses for us all." They advanced towards me, but at that instant the Count arrived furious. "How dare you touch him, when I had forbidden it? Back, it belongs to me." June 17th. This morning I saw in the yard 2 great wagons, containing great square boxes, which were evidently empty. June 24th. I must take action. I could only get into his room through his window. God help me in my task. Goodbye, Mina, if I fail. Goodbye, my faithful friend and second father. I did not feel dizzy. I was too excited. I looked around for the count, but the room was empty. I could not find the keys anywhere. The only interesting thing I found was money from lots of countries, a great heap of gold in one corner, and coins of all kinds. None of them that I noticed was less than 300 years old. At one corner of the room was a heavy door and a stair down. I descended carefully. There was a dark passage through which came a deathly, sickly odor. At last I found myself in an old ruined chapel, which was used as a graveyard. There were 50 boxes in all. In one of them, on newly dug earth, lay the Count. He was either dead or asleep. I fled from the place. June 29th. The Count said, "Tomorrow, my friend, we must part. You will return to your beautiful England. I shall not be here, but all shall be ready for your journey." When I was in my room and about to lie down, I heard the voice of the Count whispering at my door. "Back! Your time is not yet come. Wait! Tonight is mine." The three women laughed in a horrible way. Lord, help me. June 30th. These may be the last words I ever write in this diary. I must find a way out from his dreadful place. Goodbye, Mina. Mina Murray's Journal. July 24th. Goodbye. Lucy met me at the station, looking sweeter and lovelier than ever. We drove up to her house at the Crescent. This is a lovely place. She told me all over again about Arthur and their coming marriage. That made me feel a little heartsick, for I haven't heard from Jonathan for a whole month, and we are to get married as well. I hope nothing has happened to him. I wonder where he is, and if he is thinking of me. I wish he were here. July 26th. Lucy, although she is well, has lately taken the habit of walking in her sleep. Her mother and I have decided that I am to lock the door of our room every night. Arthur Huntwood, only son of Lord Godalming, is coming up here shortly, as soon as he can leave town. I dare say she will be all right when he arrives. August 9th. Last night, strangely, a derelict ship arrived. It is Russian, from Varna, and it is called the Demeter. She has only a small cargo, a number of great wooden boxes filled with mold. A dog landed from the ship. However, it was not to be found. The captain was dead. August 11th. Suddenly I became awake and sat up. I could not see Lucy. The bed was empty, and she was not in the room. I got ready to look for her. There was a bright full moon. I found Lucy on her favorite seat in the park. Something dark stood behind the seat and bent over her. I could not tell what it was, whether a man or beast. I ran to her as fast as I could, and I called in fright, "Lucy!" and the dark figure raised the head, and I could see a white face and red, gleaming eyes. Lucy did not answer. I could see her half reclining with her head lying over the back of the seat, all alone, still asleep. She put her hand to her throat and moaned. She had two little red points in her throat. When I had her wrapped up, I put my shoes on her feet and walked her home. We got home without meeting us all. Before falling asleep, she asked me not to say a word to anyone about it. I hesitated at first to promise, but I did. I locked the door, and the key is now tied to my wrist. August 13th. Again I awoke in the night and found Lucy sitting up in bed, still asleep, pointing to the window. I got up quietly and looked out. There was a great bat. August 17th. Lucy seems to be growing weaker. I looked at her throat just now as she lays asleep, and the tiny wounds have not healed. I shall insist on the doctor seeing them. August 19th. At last news of Jonathan. My dear has been ill. That is why he did not write. I will leave in the morning to meet Jonathan and to bring him home. He is in a hospital in Budapest. August 24th, Budapest. I am finally with him. He has had some fearful shock, so says his doctor. He came in train from Kleinburg. The station master told the guard that Jonathan rushed into the station shouting for a ticket back home. Seeing that he was English, they gave him a ticket for the farthest station on the way. He is much better now. He has given me his diary. We are to be married in an hour, in the hospital. Dr. Seward's diary. September 2nd. Arthur has left to see his father, who is very ill, and asked me to look after our dear Lucy, for he says she is very ill and worse every day. The qualitative analysis gave a quite normal condition and showed a vigorous state of health, but I saw her weak, pale, languid, and sad. I am in doubt, so I have written to my old friend and master, Professor Van Helsing, from Amsterdam, who knows a lot about obscure diseases. He is a philosopher and a metaphysician, and one of the most advanced scientists of his days. He has, I believe, an absolutely open mind. September 7th. Van Helsing and I were shown up to Lucy's room. I was horrified when I saw her today. She was ghastly pale. My God, he said, this is dreadful. There is not time to be lost. She needs a transfusion of blood at once. Is it you or me? Just then Arthur arrived, anxious. He wanted to help. Tell me, and I shall do it. I can give my blood to her. Having finished his operation, Van Helsing adjusted the pillow to the patient's head. As he did so, he and I could see the red mark on her throat. Arthur did not notice it. When Arthur had gone, I asked the professor in a whisper, "What do you make of that mark on her throat?" The professor stood up. "I must go back to Amsterdam tonight," he said. "There are books and things there which I want. You must remain here all night and watch her. I shall be back as soon as possible." September 10th. I must have fallen asleep, for I was awakened by the professor. He raised his hand and pointed to the bed. I felt my knees begin to tremble. There lay poor Lucy, more horribly white and wan-looking than ever. We rubbed her palms and her wrists and her heart. He said, "It is not too late. It has to be you this time, friend John." As he spoke, we began the transfusion operation. September 11th. This afternoon I found Lucy much better. The professor showed Lucy a great bundle of white garlic flowers. He put them in her window and hung them round her neck. September 13th. Lucy is better. The professor smiled and looked quite jubilant. "Aha, my treatment is working." To which Lucy's mother replied, "Lucy's state this morning is due in part to me. The room was awfully stuffy. There were a lot of those horrible, strong-smelling flowers about everywhere, and she actually had a bunch of them round her neck. I took them all away and opened the window to let in a little fresh air." After she had spoken, for the first time in my life, I saw Van Helsing break down. "Come," he said, "I shall provide my blood today." Presently, he took an opportunity of telling her mother that she must not remove anything from Lucy's room without consulting him. Then he took over the care of the case himself. He said that he would watch the night and the next, and will write to me when to come. September 18th. I got a telegram from Professor Van Helsing with 22 hours of delay. He asked to me to be at Lucy's the previous night. Oh God, I ran. I was knocking on the door when Van Helsing came and said, "Did you not get my telegram? Then I fear it is too late. God's will be done." With trembling hands, we opened the door and entered into Lucy's room. How shall I describe what we saw? On the bed lay Lucy and her mother. The latter lay farthest in, showing her drawn white face with a look of horror fixed upon it. By her side lay Lucy, with a white face and still more drawn. We found upon her mother's bosom the flowers which had been round her neck. Her throat was bare, showing the two little wounds. The professor bent over the bed. He cried out to me, "It is not yet too late. Quick, quick, bring the brandy." So I did. He rubbed the brandy on her lips and on her wrists and the palms of her hands. Just then a friend of Arthur and Dr. Jack Seward, Quincy Morris, had arrived to check on Lucy. She needed another transfusion of blood. He offered himself, and we went through that operation. Once this was done, we filled up the certificate of Lucy's mother's death. When Lucy woke in the afternoon, she realized about her mother's death. We did what we could to comfort her. September 19th. In the afternoon, she asked for Arthur, and we telegraphed him. Quincy went off to pick him up at the station. September 20th. Lucy was breathing stertorously, and her face was at its worst. Her teeth seemed longer and sharper than they had been in the morning, in particular the canine teeth. At 6 o'clock, Van Helsing came to relieve me. He bent down and examined her carefully. "Mein Gott!" he exclaimed. I bent over her and looked. The wounds on the throat had absolutely disappeared. For 5 minutes, Van Helsing stood looking at her. Then he turned to me and said calmly, "She is dying. It will not be long now." I went to the dining room and waked Arthur. I told him as gently as I could that both Van Helsing and I feared that the end was near. He covered his face with his hands and slid down on his knees by the sofa, with his head buried, praying. I took him by the hand and raised him up. When we came into Lucy's room, I could see that Van Helsing had done everything to make her look as pleasing as possible. He had even brushed her hair. She opened her eyes, and seeing him, whispered softly, "Arthur, oh my love, I am so glad you have come. Kiss me." He was stopping to kiss her, when Van Helsing motioned him back. "No," he whispered, "not yet. Hold her hand. It will comfort her more." Arthur took her hand and knelt beside her. Very shortly after, she opened her eyes and took Van Helsing's hand. "My true friend," she said in a faint voice, "guard him and give me peace." "I swear it," he said solemnly. Then he turned to Arthur and said to him, "Come, my child, take her hand in yours and kiss her on the forehead only once. It is all over. She is dead." I stood beside Van Helsing and said, "Poor girl, there is peace for her at last." He turned to me and said with grave solemnity, "Not so. It is only the beginning." When I asked him what he meant, he only shook his head and answered, "We can do nothing yet. Wait and see." The funeral was arranged for the following day, so that Lucy and her mother might be buried together. I noticed that Van Helsing never kept far away. This was possibly because there were no relatives at hand. Arthur had to be back the next day to attend his father's funeral. Under these circumstances, Van Helsing and I took care of everything. He insisted upon looking over Lucy's papers himself. When all was done, before going to rest, we went to look at poor Lucy. I could not believe that I was looking at a corpse. She was most beautiful than ever. The professor looked grave. He placed garlic flowers around the bed. Then he took from his neck a little gold crucifix and placed it over her mouth. He said, "Tomorrow I want you to bring me, before night, a set of post-mortem knives." "Must we make an autopsy?" I asked. "Yes and no. Let me tell you now, but not a word to any other. I want to cut off her head and take out her heart. I would like to do it tonight, but for Arthur I must not. I will be free after his father's funeral tomorrow, and he will want to see her. But why to do it at all? The girl is dead. Why would you mutilate her poor body without any need?" He put his hand on my shoulder and said, with infinite tenderness, "Friend John, I pity your poor bleeding heart. There are things that you do not know, but that you shall know. Strange and terrible days await before us. Will you not have faith in me?" Mina Harker's Journal, September 22nd, Exeter. Mr. Hawkins is dead, and he will be buried today. He left all his possessions to Jonathan, and he is not easy with that. He loved the old man like a father. The service was very simple and very solemn. We came back to town quietly, and we walked down Piccadilly. Jonathan was holding me by the arm, the way he used to in the old days, before I went to school. I felt Jonathan clutch my arm so tight that he hurt me, and he said under his breath, "My God." I am always anxious about Jonathan, and I fear that some nervous fit may upset him again. He was very pale, and his eyes seemed half in terror and half in amazement. He gazed at a tall, thin man with a beaky nose and a beard. His face was wicked. It was hard, cruel, and sensual. "Do you know who he is?" he asked me. "No, dear," I said. "I don't know him. Who is he?" "It is the man himself. I believe it is Count Dracula." He was terrified, and I drove him home, where a telegram from Van Helsing, whoever he may be, reported that Lucy and her mother were dead. September 24th. I have read Jonathan's diary. Poor dear! How he must have suffered, whether it be true or only imagination. I wonder if there is any truth in it at all. I suppose I shall never know, for I dare not open the subject to him. And yet that man we saw yesterday, he seemed quite certain of him. September 25th. I have got a letter from Dr. Van Helsing. He needs to talk to me. I cannot help feeling terribly excited as the time draws near for his visit, for somehow I expected that it will throw some light upon Jonathan's sad experience, and he will tell me about Lucy. That is the reason for his coming. It is concerning Lucy and her sleepwalking, and not about Jonathan. How silly I am. He has come. He talked to me about Lucy, as I thought, and I gave him my own journal, which he will read tonight. Everything he said was so strange. If I had not read Jonathan's journal first, I should have never accepted even a possibility. Poor dear Jonathan! How he must have suffered! I shall try to save him from it. When he comes tomorrow, I shall ask him about Jonathan. When he came back, I feared that he would think me a fool and Jonathan a madman. That journal is all so strange that I hesitated to go on. But he was so sweet and kind, and he had promised to help, and I trusted him. If you will let me, I shall give you a paper to read. I have typewritten it out. It will tell you about my travel and Jonathan's. It is the copy of his journal when abroad, and all that happened. I dare not say anything of it. You will read for yourself and judge, and then perhaps you will be so kind to tell me what you think. I shall come in the morning to see you and your husband, if I may. He took the papers with him and went away, and I sit here thinking I don't know what.
Dr. Seward's Diary, September 26.
Van Helsing came today. He finally spoke to me about Lucy's illness. I think he is mad. This strongly affected him. He thinks Lucy is a vampire and is neither dead nor alive. You are a clever man, friend John. You reason well, but you are too prejudiced. You do not let your eyes see nor your ears hear. Do you not think that there are things which you cannot understand, and that some people see things that others cannot? There are always mysteries in life. Do you know the whole mystery of life and death? Can you tell me why men believe, in all ages and places, that there are men and women who cannot die? My thesis is this one. I want you to believe in things that you cannot. Let me illustrate. Tonight I'm going to prove it. Dare you come with me? We'll spend the night in the churchyard where Lucy lies. I have the key that locks the tomb. My heart sank within me. I could do nothing but nod. We found Lucy's coffin, and he took out a turnscrew. When his work was done, he mentioned to me to look. The coffin was empty. It was certainly a surprise to me, and gave me a considerable shock. Are you satisfied now, friend John? He asked. I am glad that Lucy's body is not in that coffin, but that only proves one thing, that it is not there. The professor sighed. Oh, well, he said, we must have more proofs. Come with me. Then he told me to watch at one side of the churchyard whilst he would watch at the other. Just after I had taken my place, I heard a distant clock strike 12. I was angry with the professor. Suddenly, as I turned round, a white figure flitted in the direction of the tomb. The tomb itself was hidden by trees, and I could not see where the figure had gone. Van Helsing insists on me going with him on another expedition. I felt all had been useless. September 27th. I was midday. It was midday. Van Helsing walked over to Lucy's coffin, and I followed him. A shock of surprise and dismay shot through me. There lay Lucy, possibly more radiantly beautiful than ever, and I could not believe that she was dead. Her lips were red, and on the cheeks there was a delicate bloom. I could not accept still such an overwhelming idea as Van Helsing suggested. Van Helsing sent Arthur a letter asking him to come urgently. September 28th. Surely there must be some rational explanation for all these mysterious things. Is it possible that the professor could have done it himself? I shall watch him carefully. I must get some light on the mystery. September 29th. Last night, at a little before 10 o'clock, Arthur and Quincy came into Van Helsing's room. When the professor explained to them what was to be done, Arthur burst into tears. They both came with us this time. It was just a quarter before 12 o'clock when we got into the churchyard. Arthur was very pale and silent. When the lid was removed, he stepped forward. The coffin was empty. We went out. I am closing the tomb so that the undead may not enter, said Van Helsing. There was a long spell of silence, and then the professor pointed to a white figure approaching. My own heart grew cold, and I could hear Arthur gasp as we recognized Lucy's features, but somehow changed. The sweetness was turned to heartless cruelty. The four of us ranged in a line before the door of the tomb. She advanced to Arthur and said, "Come to me, Arthur. My arms are hungry for you. Come and we can rest together." Van Helsing held between them his little crucifix. She recoiled from it and, full of rage, dashed past him as if to enter the tomb. When within a step or two from the door, however, she stopped as if arrested by some irresistible force. Van Helsing broke the silence by asking Arthur, "Answer me, oh my friend. Am I to proceed in my work?" "Do as you should, friend," he groaned in spirit. Van Helsing removed the sacred wafer from the door, and the woman with a corporeal body as real at that moment as our own passed through the interstice. September 29th at night. We got to the graveyard by 1:30 to perform our horrible work. Arthur took the stake and the hammer, and when once his mind was set on action, his hands never trembled, nor even quivered. Van Helsing opened his missal. He began to read, and Quincy and I followed as well as we could. Arthur placed the point over the heart, and then he struck with all his might. The body shook and then quieted. When we looked again at the coffin, there was Lucy as we had seen her in life, with her face of unequaled sweetness and purity. Van Helsing said to Arthur, "Now, my child, you may kiss her, for she is not a devil now. Her soul is with God." Arthur bent and kissed her. Then we sent him and Quincy out of the tomb. The professor and I cut off the head and filled the mouth with garlic. Before we moved away, Van Helsing said, "Now, my friends, one step of our work is done. There remains a greater task. We have learned to believe. Shall you not help me?" Each in turn, we took his hand, and the promise was made. September 30th. The Harkers arrived at 9 o'clock. He's incredibly clever, if one can judge from his face, and full of energy. She is smart, beautiful, and sweet. She gave me her diary and her husband's, and I mine to them. After lunch, Harker and his wife were arranging in chronological order every scrap of evidence they had. It is strange that it never struck me that the very next house might be the Count's hiding place that Jonathan had helped him buy. At 5 o'clock, Godalming and Morris arrived and studied the transcript of the various diaries and letters. Mina Harker's Journal, September 13th. September 30th. Today we arrived at Dr. Seward's home, which is also a lunatic asylum where he studies his patients. We met in his study after dinner. The professor said, "It's good that I tell you something about the kind of enemy we have to deal with. This vampire which is amongst us is as strong as 20 men. He is of cunning more than mortal, for his cunning be the growth of ages. He still has got the aid of necromancy. He can, within his range, direct the elements, the storm, the fog, the thunder. He can command all the mean things, the rat, the owl, the bat, the wolf. He can grow and become small, and he can vanish and become invisible. How then are we to begin our strike to destroy him? To fail here means that we will become as him. The gates of heaven would be shut to us forever. What do say you? While he was speaking, Jonathan had taken my hand. There was no need of speaking between us. I answer for mine and myself, he said. Count me in, Professor, said Mr. Quincy Morris, laconically as usual. I am with you, said Lord Godalming, for Lucy's sake, if for no other reason. Dr. Seward simply nodded. So, as we all shook hands, our solemn compromise was made. Well, we have on our side the power of working as a team. We have the resources of science. We are free to act and think. We have self-devotion in a cause and an aim to achieve which is not a selfish one. These things mean much. And then there are things which so afflict him that he has no power, as garlic and my crucifix. Now we must settle what to do. We know that 50 boxes of earth come from the castle to Whitby. We also know that at least some of these boxes have been removed. Our first step should be to ascertain in the rest remain of the house beyond this wall. And for you, Madame Mina, you are too precious to us to run the risk. We are men and are able to bear. You must be our star and our hope. They have now gone off to Carfax, with means to get into the house. Jonathan Harker's Journal, October 1st. We took our way to the next house, taking care of keeping ourselves in the shadows of the trees when the moonlight shone out. When we got to the porch, the professor opened his bag and took out a lot of things as he spoke. My friends, keep this crucifix near your heart. Put these garlic flowers round your neck. For other enemies more mundane, this revolver and this knife, and for aid in all, these small electric lamps. And above all, at the last, this. This was a portion of sacred wafer. Dr. Seward tried 1 or 2 skeleton keys. He got one to sweet. We pressed on the door. The rusted hinge cracked, and it slowly opened. The professor was the first to move forward. We closed the door behind us. Then we all lit our lamps and proceeded on our search. I could not get away from the feeling that there was someone else amongst us. I think the feeling was common to us all, for I noticed that the others kept looking over their shoulders at every sound and every new shadow, just as I felt myself doing. I had an idea of the direction to the chapel, so I led the way, and after a few wrong turnings, I found it. We made an accurate examination of the place. There were only 29 boxes left out of the 50. A few minutes later, I saw Morris stepped suddenly back from a corner. The whole place was becoming crowded with rats, and we moved out. We closed the outer door with bars and padlocks, and began our search in the house. We found nothing but dust. The house was silent when we got back. I tiptoed into our own room and found Mina asleep, breathing so softly that I had to put my ear down to hear it. She looked paler than usual. Dr. Seward's Diary, October 2nd. One of my patients got seriously wounded. He said that the Count had visited his house. I fear for Mina. I woke Van Helsing, Arthur, and Quincy. Outside the Harkers' door, we paused. We opened the door. What I saw appalled me. On the bed beside the window lay Jonathan Harker, his face flushed and breathing heavily as though in a stupor. Kneeling on the near edge of the bed facing outwards was his wife. By her side stood the Count. His right hand gripped her by the back of the neck, forcing her to face down on his bosom. Her white nightdress was smeared with blood. As we burst into the room, the Count turned his face and his eyes flamed red with devilish passion. The professor has gained his feet and was holding towards him an envelope which contained the sacred wafer. The Count stopped as we advanced, lifting our crucifixes. The moonlight suddenly failed, and later we saw nothing but a faint vapor. For a few seconds, Mina lay in helpless attitude and bewildered. Van Helsing whispered to me, "Jonathan is in a stupor. I must wake him." He was dazed for a few seconds, and then full consciousness seemed to burst upon him at once, and he started up. "In God's name, what does this mean?" Harker cried out. "Mina, dear, what is it? What does all the blood mean? My God, help her!" With a quick movement, he jumped from bed and began to put on his clothes. "What has happened? Tell me all about it," he cried without pausing. "Dr. Van Helsing, do something to save her. It cannot have gone too far yet. Guard her while I look for him." His wife seized hold of him and cried out, "No, Jonathan, you must not leave me. I have suffered enough tonight, God knows." Van Helsing and I tried to calm them both. The professor held up his golden crucifix and said with wonderful calmness, "Do not fear, my dear. We are here, and while this is close to you, no fool thing can approach. You are safe tonight, and we must be calm and take counsel together." "Unclean, unclean! I must touch him or kiss him no more," she cried. To this her husband spoke out resolutely. "Nonsense, Mina." He put out his arms and folded her to his breast. Then Mina told us what happened to her, how she saw the mist again all over the room, how she tried to awake Jonathan, but she could not, how the Count took her blood. Her husband was broken, and she suddenly stopped, for it was too hard for her to go on with the next part of her terrible story. He pulled open his shirt, and with his long sharp nails opened a vein in his breast. He seized my neck and pressed my mouth to the wound so that I must swallow some to his. What have I done to deserve such a fate? God pity me. Jonathan Harker's Journal, October 3rd. Mina is so good and brave that we all felt that our hearts were strengthened to work and endure for her. We began to discuss what we were to do. As usual, Van Helsing had though ahead of everyone else, and had prepared everything with an exact ordering. It was finally agreed that before starting for Piccadilly, the second house of the Count, we should destroy the Count's lair close at hand. Breakfast was ready. We tried to be cheerful and encourage each other, and Mina was the brightest and most cheerful of us. When we finished, the professor said to my wife, "Now, Madam Mina, you are in any case quite safe here until the sunset. But before we go, let me see your arm against personal attack. I have prepared your chamber so that he may not enter. Now let me guard yourself. On your forehead I touch this piece of sacred wafer in the name of the Father, the Son, and..." There was a fearful scream which almost froze our hearts to hear. As he had placed the wafer on Mina's forehead, it had burned into the skin as though it had been a piece of white hot metal. It was a horrible burn. I had thrown myself beside her and held her tight, for she was overwhelmed, whilst our friends turned away their eyes that ran tears. We entered Carfax without any trouble and found all things the same as on the first occasion. We opened the coffins. The earth smelled sickly, but we did not seem to mind. The professor took from his bag a piece of the sacred wafer, and he laid in it reverently on the earth. One by one, we treated in the same way each of the great boxes, and left them as we had found them to all appearance. As we passed across the lawn of our way to the station to catch our train, we could see the front of the asylum. I looked eagerly, and in the window of my own room saw Mania. She was waving her hand. I might not see her again. How much I love her. Piccadilly, 12:30 o'clock. We could enter the house thanks to Arthur and Quincy acquittance. None even suspect that Lord Goldman was not the real owner, and the police sent a man to open the door to him. While they both were leaving to the third address, we moved to explore the house, all keeping together in case of attack, for we did not know if the Count might be in the house. In the dining room, which was at the back of the hall, we found 8 boxes. It was evident to us that the Count was not at present in the house, and we proceeded to search for any of his effects. Dr. Seward's Diary, October 3rd. Lord Arthur and Quincy arrived. They have found 12 boxes in the place and had destroyed them all. Our work was not over, and would never be until we find the missing box. We all could hear a key softly inserted in the lock of the hall door. The slow, careful steps came along the hall.
The Count was evidently prepared for some surprise. Suddenly, he leaped into the room. There was something panther-like in the movement. The first to act was Harker, who threw himself before the door leading into the room. We all advanced upon him. It was a pity that we had not better organized a plan of attack. The expression of the Count's face was so hellish that for a moment I feared for Harker. Instinctively, I moved forward with a protective impulse, holding the crucifix and wafer in my left hand. It would be impossible to describe the expression of hate and anger on his face. He threw himself out of the window. We ran over and saw him spring, unhurt from the ground. He turned and spoke to us. "You think to baffle me. You shall be sorry. You think you have left me without a place to rest, but I have more. I have spread them over centuries, and time is on my side. Your girls are mine already, and through them you shall also be mine, to be my jackals when I want to feed." The first to speak was the professor. "We have learned something. He fears us. For if not, why did he run away?" With sad hearts we came back to my house, where we found Mrs. Harker waiting us, and we told her everything which had happened. "Jonathan," she said, and the word sounded like music on her lips. It was full of love and tenderness. "Jonathan, dear, and you all my true friends, I know that you must fight, that you must destroy. But this is not a work of hate. That poor soul who has wrought all this misery is the saddest case of all. You must be pitiful to him too." Jonathan Harker's Journal, October 4th, early morning. I was wakened up by Mina. She said to me hurriedly, "Go, call the professor. I want to see him at once." "Why?" I asked. "I have an idea. I suppose it must have come in the night and matured without we knowing it. He must hypnotize me before the dawn, and there I shall be able to speak. Go quickly, dear. The time is getting close." 2 or 3 minutes later, Van Helsing was in the room, and Mr. Morris and Lord Godalming were with Dr. Seward at the door. She explained her idea to Van Helsing, and he began his work. Gradually, her eyes closed. When Mina opened her eyes, she did not seem to be the same woman. "Where are you?" The answer came in a neutral way. "I do not know. Sleep has no place it can call its own." For several minutes there was silence. Mina sat rigid, and the professor stood staring at her fixedly. The rest of us hardly dared to breathe. "What do you see?" "I can see nothing. It is all dark." "What do you hear?" "The lapping of water. I can hear some men outside." "Then you are on a ship?" "Oh, yes." The answer came quick. "What are you doing?" "I am still. Oh, so still. It is like death." By this time the sun had risen. Dr. Van Helsing placed his hands on Mina's shoulders and laid her head down softly on her pillow. "There is not a moment to lose. It may not be yet too late. He must have taken his last earth box on board a ship, and he leaves the land to his castle. Let's follow him." Dr. Seward's diary, October 11th, Varna. We are expecting news about Dracula's ship. We have come to understand that sunrise and sunset are to Mina times of peculiar freedom, when her old self can be manifested without by controlling force. Tonight, taking her husband's hands in hers, she began. We are all here together in freedom for perhaps the last time. Then I shall tell you plainly what I want. You must all promise me, even you, my beloved husband, that if the time should come, you will kill me. One by one, even Jonathan, with immense sorrow in his heart, made our promise to her with our eyes full of tears. October 27th. No news yet of the ship we waited for. The Count is escaping from us. October 28th. A telegram came announcing the arrival of the ship in Galatz. Mina Harker's journal. Now we are well equipped for our persecution. Lord Godalming and Jonathan have a lovely steam launch ready to start. Dr. Seward and Mr. Morris have a dozen good horses. We have all the maps and appliances of various kinds that can be had. Van Helsing and I are to leave by train tonight for Beresti, where we are to buy a carriage to drive to the Borgo Pass. We shall drive ourselves. We can trust no one. We have all got arms, even me, a large revolver. The weather is getting colder every hour, and there are snow flurries which come and go. It took all my courage to say goodbye to my darling. We may never meet again. Memorandum by Abraham Van Helsing. November 4th. This is to my old and true friend John Seward, in case I may not see him. Madam Mina has been so drowsy all day that she was not like herself. She sleeps all the time. She had done literally nothing all day long. She has lost her appetite. She makes no entries into her diary. At sunset, I tried to hypnotize her, but with no effect. November 5th. I begin to fear that the fatal spell of the place was upon her. Some willing figures of mist and snow came closer, but keeping out of the holy circle I made. Then they began to materialize into the same three women that Jonathan saw in the room. They smiled at poor Mina and said, "Come to us, sister." God be thanked she is not yet one of them, for I saw the horror in her eyes. At the first coming of the dawn, these horrid figures melted in the whirling mist and snow. When I left Madam Mina sleeping within the holy circle, I took my way to the castle to do my terrible work. I knew that there were at least 3 graves to find, so I searched it and I found them. These females laid so full of life and beauty that I shuddered. Before the spell could be wrought upon me, I had nerved myself to my wild work. There was one great tomb more lordly than all the rest. Huge it was and nobly decorated. On it was but one word, Dracula. This, then, was the home of the undead king vampire, to whom so many more were due. After I finished my horrible task, before leaving the castle, I fixed its entrances so that never more can the Count enter there. When I stepped into the circle, Madam Mina woke up from her sleep. She tells me that she knows our friends are close. Mina's journal. November 6th. We heard the sound of horses far yet. We had a look with our glass and saw our 4 men on horseback, pursuing some gypsies who carried the box. But suddenly, they had the place full of gypsies. They fired, and the gypsies took their knives to attack. In the middle of this, I could see that Jonathan jumped into the cart, raised the great box, and flew it over the wheels to the ground. Meanwhile, Morris was fighting the gypsies. One of them cut him, and I saw him bleeding. Just then the lid of the box was moved backwards. It was then that we also fired from our side to help our friends. We were now nearby. By this time the gypsies, seeing themselves covered by the Winchesters, had given in and made no further resistance. The sun was almost down, and the whole group ran away. I saw the Count lying within the box, just like a waxen image. At that instant, Jonathan cut off his head, while Morris' knife plunged into his heart. It was like a miracle. The whole body crumbled into dust and passed from our sight. Then the man was in the box. There was in the face such a look of peace as I could have never imagined. Mr. Morris fell to the ground. We flew to him. With a sigh, he took my hand. With a feeble effort, he smiled at me and said, "I am only happy to have been of service. Oh God," he cried, pointing to me. "It was worth for this today. Look, her forehead is clean. The curse has passed away." And to our most bitter grief, with a smile in silence, a brave gentleman died. Note: 7 years have passed. Our boy was born the same day that Quincy Morris died. Mina holds the secret belief that some of our brave friend's spirit has passed into him. We named him Quincy. Godalming and Seawards are both happily married. Van Helsing said, with our boy on his knee, "This boy will someday know that a brave and gallant woman his mother is, and how some men loved her so much that they did dare much for her sake." Jonathan Harker. The end.